We thought it would be fun to pick an athlete that's somewhat in the middle of our two skill sets. So we looked at a basketball player. Something else that's on the table in the future might be a soccer player if you guys like this video. But we're going to kind of pretend that they're a fictitious athlete that we're working with and go through kind of the coaching questions and some stuff that we might need to know. And these questions are, you're going to be able to find these questions in a textbook, but kind of the art of coaching is sometimes reading between the lines. So what we want to really unpack for you guys today is why we need to know these questions and what benefit is that going to provide us for program review. What kind of picture is that painting for us in terms of how we could interact with the client? So the client we're working with, a basketball player, just finished his senior year of high school, looking to play college basketball. 6'3", shooting guard, 220 pounds, and that's the extent of our knowledge. And then we're kind of going to take it from step one and unpack why we would ask the questions that we would ask. So I guess we'll start with you with what's some of the first things that you would need to know and why.
Yeah, one of the first things that I would want to know is how long have you been playing basketball? What level have you played at before? You just finished your high school season. Are you playing travel ball? Did you play AAU? What division was your high school that you played in? How far did you guys make it in the tournament? And the reason that we get that background is so that if you are a relatively novice player, I'm not going to give you maybe some of the conditioning workouts that I would a more advanced player, or some of the ball handling drills that I would give a more advanced player. So knowing where you're at in the beginner to expert range, like if you played AAU or summer ball, like you're probably at the higher end of the range than if you were just playing in high school. And if you played at I guess the school size doesn't matter too much, right? Like I think if you play in a bigger school, you're probably a little bit more likely to be a little more advanced, just because to make a team at a bigger school is going to be harder than to make a team at a smaller school. But that will really allow me to kind of dial in my training for you as far as, okay, what type of conditioning am I going to do? What kind of drills am I going to have you do? Because along the spectrum of novice to expert, there are going to be a lot of different drills and skills that you need to know, whether you're a novice or whether you're an expert. And those drills may or may not overlap. Like they might be some of the same drills, but they might not be. They might just be toned down for the novice and really turned up for the expert. The conditioning and things like that, previous history with doing that is going to be really important too, because I'm not gonna have you go do, an hour worth of interval running if the most that you've ever done is 20 minutes. So that's kind of why we get the history, and we need to know more about the athlete's history and what they've done in the past. Because the number one goal is to keep the athlete healthy. And if we give them too much too soon, or as far as a conditioning standpoint goes, it increases the likelihood of injury. And if we give them too advanced drills that they're not ready for, then um, they may just kind of give up because it's too hard, right? Like you've got the bell
Yeah.
curve of arousal. So, it can't be too easy, because then they're just going to get bored. You kind of want it at the top of the bell curve, but also like if it's too hard, then it's going to be too difficult for them. They're going to give up because it's too hard. So you want it somewhere in the middle of that bell curve that fits where they're at. And that's kind of why, along with the conditioning and the skills, we really need to know where this athlete falls in their training conditioning history.
So you're not only are you going into this assuming that you're going to be doing skills work, but you're also thinking about like the psychological aspect of it in terms of keeping them bought in.
Yeah, bought in, motivated, because if if this athlete is looking to play college basketball is not something even at the Division 3. I say even, it's still college basketball, Division 3, 2, 1, whatever. It's still a huge time commitment. I mean, you're putting in multiple hours of practice a day, pretty much year round. And if they don't have that motivation or buy-in, then they're not going to stick with it. And they're not going to be playing for very long.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That would be kind of where I want to start too, but then I would also want to know kind of their exercise history. So like what type of exercise were they doing specifically with the team that they were coming up with in high school? Like I was a Division 3 soccer player, and then I was considering trying out for also the basketball team. I ended up not doing that, thankfully. Went a different route. That would have been exhausting. But just looking at the fitness experience that I got as a high school soccer player, the extent of our conditioning was suicides, and then like random drills in practice, and then just like crazy long jogs. Like not a ton really relevant to any of the positions that we were playing. Like it was just like, soccer players run, so we're gonna start practice with just like a bonkers long run. It's like, okay, I'm a I'm a center back, so like I sprint, tackle, and recover. But this is good too. So you never know where people are going to come from with that, and that really informs like where how you can train them essentially. Like if you gave me, well, this is actually a perfect example. Like I basically almost washed out of the conditioning for the Division 3 soccer team because I was so underprepared by my high school conditioning. Like it was bad, 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 bad. Um, so it's really going to inform like what we would essentially do with you, and then your resistance training history is obviously going to dictate like the complexity, the volumes, and the intensity that I'm going to give you. Like if you're going into Division 3 basketball, I'm going to assume a requisite amount of skill, um, and probably at least a minor amount of resistance training. But even if not, there's going to be some things that we would need to do. So like if you don't know the barbell back squat, we're probably going to be learning the barbell back squat, maybe a front squat, deadlift, all these things that are shown pretty clearly in the literature to contribute to player safety on the court, but then also like vertical jump. Like you're even if you're a guard, like I want you to be able to get up there. I want you quick. I want you explosive. And a prerequisite of being quick and explosive is being very, very strong. I can't remember his first name. Stone. He's a leading professor in strength and conditioning. I think he's actually a co-author of a few of the chapters in the CSCS text. But he was giving a presentation at the NSCA on uh, developing power in athletes, and I forget the exact number, but you'll get the idea from this. Something around the idea of 2/3 of athletes are under strong essentially to be able to be powerful enough for their sport to succeed well in their sport. Um, because a lot of people, I don't think they realize that strength is a prerequisite to power. It's really hard to be super explosive if you're squatting like, I don't know, some very small number compared to your body weight, right? Um, so yeah, that those are the two places where I would aggressively start. Would that be the second place you would go, or where would you go next?
Yeah, kind of. And along those lines, I was even thinking, what's your other athletic background,
Mm,
right? Like, do you play other sports? Because there can be a lot of translation from some other sports, if he's a basketball player, but he also played soccer, maybe. And so, okay, well, his conditioning is probably going to be a little higher because there's more
unless he's me.
endurance in soccer. Yeah. So, figuring out what their other athletic background is, um, to kind of know, you know, what can we do and just get a better overall picture of the athlete. I like where you went with the resistance training, right? Again, just background. We need to know, have you done any resistance training before? Because if not, then, we got to start at square one and not at square 20. Um, so yeah, a lot of good points that you brought up, and probably, yeah, that would be the next place that I would go.
I would also,
Um,
sorry, were you
yeah,
gonna
good.
pop off of that? Yeah.
No, no, you go for it.
The next, I also would kind of want to know like life, like what's going on in life right now, especially like transitioning to school. Like, are you also working like 20 hours a week as like a farmhand, or like stress is stress is stress is stress, right? If you're working 60 hours as a lawyer, that takes a toll on you and it affects your systemic ability to recover and also learn new skills. So, Someone that has like no stress, I have like this much recovery capacity to work on whatever we need to work on. If you're uh,
Mhm.
taking on 21 credits, triple major in like neuroscience and astrophysics or something, freaking like now all of a sudden this is here. And then you have to ask
Right.
yourself, if my recovery capacity is here, how much of that time needs to be spent on the court? Like, because that's like on one of the most important things is like your skill in the basketball court. Like you have to figure out where you're going to cut corners if you have that little time. And I think
Hmm.
most people would probably, I don't know if this is correct, most people would probably pick being good enough to get playing time versus being strong enough to be safe, if you had the very limited time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, like, one thing that I ask all of my athletes, regardless of the sport or event or distance they're competing in, is what does life look like outside of sport? Because, as you said, stress is stress. It doesn't matter if it comes from your sport or from life. The body can't really differentiate between different stressors, different types of stress, obviously, but it can't differentiate like stress from running versus stress from work. And it's one thing I always do with my athletes is, let me know how much time you have to train during the week. If you only have 5 hours to train, I'm not going to rate you 10 hours of workouts. That just doesn't make any sense. Training should fit into your life, not the other way around. And so figuring out what our athlete has time for is going to be really important. If they only have 12 credits, well, they're probably going to be able to train a little bit more. If they have 21 credits and they're a triple major of astrophysics and, whatever else, like they might not have a lot of time to train outside of, you know, their life. So I know this becomes a bigger issue as you get older and you have a family and you have other responsibilities. As a freshly minted college kid, he probably doesn't have a ton of responsibilities outside of, maybe he's got a job he has to work at or, you know, going to class, but, still important to make sure that we figure out what those external factors are that might cut into his training load. And as you said, his recovery load, because the training is not where we get stronger, right? Training breaks your body down. Lifting weights, you're actually decreasing your body strength, but it's in that recovery after you lift, the muscles repair and rebuild themselves and get stronger so that next time that same lift doesn't do the same amount of damage. So it's that recovery after doing the work that actually makes you stronger. And I think that's a piece that people miss all the time. I don't know about you, but I get that all the time where people are like, oh, yeah, I lift every day and I don't take any rest days and no recovery. And like I sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to break soon or you're not going to get any stronger. You have to have that recovery in order to improve and get better. So, that's probably the biggest one is figuring out what they have time for, not only to train, but also to recover. And that would definitely be my next one where I would go.
So then, kind of structured in that, then when you're outlining or asking how much time they have to train, you're also probably, or it seemed like that you're also establishing like a frequency. So that's a pretty early thing that you would, yeah. So like to be,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We get, what I normally do is I say, give me a breakdown of what a normal week looks like for you. What do you have time for? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like, did you take class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you have Tuesday, Thursdays open? Do you have like 5 hours available on one day and only 2 hours available on another day? Like, I don't generally, when I prescribe exercise, I go like the frequency. Yep, okay, we'll do 5 days a week or whatever. But within that day, I don't really care when you do it as long as it fits into your schedule. And giving the athlete the flexibility, and I'm not going to say like, okay, well, it looks like you've got a 90-minute window between classes at this time, so I want you to do your workout at this time. No, I'll rate them a 60-minute workout for the day.
yeah.
And if they want to do that in between classes, fine. If they want to do it after their classes are done or before their classes start, that's fine too. And so I like giving the athlete a little bit of autonomy so that it doesn't feel so strict as like, oh, I have to do this, this, and this. Because what we do is we provide guidelines, and this is just like, uh, if in an ideal world you could do all of this like exactly as is, that would be perfect. But even if you have to do it before class or in the middle of class or after class, like it doesn't matter when you do it, it's still going to get you 99% of the way there, even if it's not exactly how we wrote it. And so I think that's another thing that I deal with athletes is they're so strict. They're like, oh no, Todd said I have to do this at this time and at this pace and this distance and this frequency. Otherwise, I'm not going to improve at all. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So yeah, it's more so just figuring out what days do you have available and how much time on each day, and then go from there and figure out how can we move these puzzle pieces to fit into your schedule, and not you having to figure out how am I going to fit these puzzle pieces into my training schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. So then after you establish frequency, the next thing that I kind of think of is I tend to ask, regardless, is what are some things that have been successful for you in the past? So like in terms of either sport or muscle gain or fat loss, etc. Finding out what worked well for athletes is, I think, really, really beneficial because I like to describe evidence-based fitness as like a shotgun spread on the wall. Most people should fall within the shotgun spread, but you're special, you're your own unicorn, so you are probably going to be somewhere out here. Like 70% of you is perfectly in line with evidence-based things, but 30% of you is you're special and little unicorn. And part of the art of coaching is finding that. So when you ask someone what they've done that's worked really well for them in the past, or the inverse, what they've done that has not worked really well, it kind of already helps you to refine that. Like if someone says, I had a lot of success with bench press, but my elbows always end up hurting by like week 6 or something. Well, right there, I know that bench press is highly stimulative for them, but has a really big fatigue cost for them. So that would inform how I would train for them. Or if the athlete says, like, yeah, I seem to always be able to like out jump anyone on my team, but no matter what happens, I'm always the last one back from the suicides. Like I just get gassed. All of a sudden I'm like, okay, so athlete's probably really type 2 dominant, but struggles with like glycolytic, like intermediate work essentially. Like more stuff lasts longer than a minute. And right there, that's informing my training for them.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of along those same lines of, what works for me and what doesn't work for me, I like to ask my athletes, what do you enjoy the most and what do you enjoy the least? Because stuff that they enjoy may not necessarily be the same thing as what works for them. So I always ask my athletes, like, what do you like the most? Do you like the long runs, or do you like, getting in the gym 3 times a week? Like, what do you like the most and what do you like the least? Because that also then kind of helps to inform me of, all right, well, they like doing this. They don't like doing this. Why don't they like doing this? Is it because it's too hard and they're not good at it? Maybe we need to spend a little more time here and a little less time with the stuff that they like. I work with a triathlete right now, and they're more of a runner. And so I'll put workouts in for them, swimming, biking, running, and they tend to skip their biking and swimming workouts and replace them with running workouts. And I had to send them a message the other day and I was like, hey, like, we're training for an Ironman that's 8 weeks away. We know that you're a great runner. We don't need to spend time running. We need to spend time swimming and biking. So I know that you love running and that's your favorite part, but this is an Ironman. It's going to take you at least 5.5, 6 hours to ride a bike, 112 miles. It's going to take you over an hour to swim. We need to get you to that run feeling fresh and good. Otherwise, your run, the strength of your training is not going to be able to show because you haven't been swimming and you haven't been biking. So just because they like something doesn't mean that you should go, okay, yep, we're just going to do this. So yeah, figuring out what's worked for them, what doesn't work for them, but also what they like and what they don't like, because that really gives me a good idea of where I need to be focusing my efforts and where I know that they are going to be focusing their efforts.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I can't imagine that. That's like It's like a basketball player that's like, yeah, I really like playing defense, so I spend my entire week playing defense. Do you take any shots? Nah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
only one
Well,
Dennis Rodman, and you're not Dennis Rodman.
well, I was the same way, and I kicked myself when I was in high school, and even before. Like we had a baseball. I played baseball, Division II baseball, and we had when I was in high school, we had a baseball field a quarter mile from, not even a quarter mile. It was like a block from our house. And my dad and I would go down every day after school, and he would just hit me fly balls for hours. And I always say, if there were such a thing as a designated fielder in baseball, I would have played Major League Baseball because I was such a good defensive player. But I wasn't the best offensive player because I never practiced hitting. Like we went down to the field and all I did was take fly balls. I very rarely actually took batting practice and practice hitting. And so, it's like, yeah, I did the thing that I liked, but at the cost of potentially, making it to Division I baseball, or a starting role in Division II baseball or something like that. So, yeah, you got to work on your weaknesses, and just because it's something that you like, doesn't mean that you should just focus all your efforts on that.
You got the mustache for baseball. Um,
Not when I was in high school or college. This has only been in the last year, I think, that I've been able to grow this guy.
that's funny. All right, you want to wrap it up there?
Yeah, do you think there's anything else that we should kind of finish with? Or, I mean, that's, I would have to go through I literally have a document that I send out to my athletes that covers all the stuff. I guess the last thing that I would probably ask my athlete is, what are your goals, and what do you hope to learn from me to help you get there? So your goal is to make a Division III basketball team, but like, do you want to start? Do you just want to be on the team? And what do you want to learn from me in order to help get you there? Because, they may have a good understanding of what it takes, and they may not need to learn a whole lot other than like how to structure their training, but they also may have no idea what it takes. And so they just want to learn everything. So that's kind of like the last question that I ask my athletes is like, what are your main goals, and what do you want to learn from me to help you get there?
Yeah, I'm actually really big on athlete autonomy to the point where, especially early on, I'm trying to teach you more and more of how to actually like handle your programming and progression needs. So like, let's see, how do I say this? I give athletes tools at the end of the week to reflect on their training and attempt to determine increases in load or volume. And we'll obviously talk about it. I'm not going to let them get eaten by sharks, but like we'll have a conversation like on Fridays, and it's like, hey, I did this. Like, here's what the performance is doing. Here's what soreness, pump disruption's doing. Here's what the body weight's doing. Um, I want to add 2 sets this week, and then it's just like, I think that's a freaking great idea. Or and then sometimes they'll be like, but I had problems, or I don't understand X, Y, Z. How should I handle this special
Mhm.
issue or unique problem? And there's where I'm like, Papa Science, add in a little bit more information, teach you how to do that, and then
Yeah.
because I always say I like want to be able to coach people to a point where they don't feel like they have to have me to be good. Like if they want like
Yeah.
that scientific vision on them and they want to like optimize every 1%, but like I want to make an army of advanced or at least competent exercisers. So when eventually Sauron or Middle Earth tries to take over, I have a bunch of fit people ready to go.
Yeah. And that's, one of the main things as a coach is like, I want to make myself irrelevant for my athletes so that they don't need me eventually. And I know with like triathletes and runners, it's a little different. People are just looking to have exercise plans thrown to them, and it's maybe a little more complicated
Yeah,
with 3 disciplines than with resistance training.
stop it.
But eventually, if you should be able to get to the point where it's like, okay, I need to do an easy run on this day and this day, and maybe a tempo run on this day and a long run on this day. And like you could, if I was out of town or unavailable to be reached, you should be able to go, okay, well, this is kind of how it has been in the past, and this is how I'm gonna go forward because I know that Todd's not available right now. So yeah, really, I think that's a good point, is kind of like making yourself obsolete as a coach because of all of the tools and not necessarily the answers that you give your athletes. And it's kind of like the same with teaching, right? You don't just give your students the answers, you give them the tools to find the answers, and then that makes them better learners and scientists essentially. So kind of same kind of thing with athletes. That give them the tools to do it, and it'll make them a better athlete.